It's very common for people in my city to gather some friends and go spend a weekend at somebody's farmhouse right outside the city. Just a way to have a road trip experience while having a place to sleep and get mind-numbingly drunk. You know, all the classic teenager stuff. We were headed to a smaller property that my best friend's aunt had right outside Ibarra, where she would grow watermelon. Don't ask me why, and have a stable with some horses. But the best thing was that the property was in the middle of nowhere. That just meant that we could be as loud as we wanted, and there would be no complaints. First day, everything is pretty normal. We get there in the afternoon, unpack the car and choose rooms and sit out to make lunch, while two of our friends are already in the cocktail business. Nobody wanted to get that drunk yet though. So, we set out to explore the entire property. We get to the stables and meet the caretaker. It's very normal here to hire somebody to look after your farmhouse while you're not there. So, we talked to the guy. He says the horses are very nervous, and it was true. They weren't letting anybody touch them. He says that this morning we went to check on them. They were moving around and, overall, acting agitated. Something scared them at night. He warns us to keep our eyes peeled though. Says he feels some bad vibes in the place. We don't really take him seriously. Outside of the big cities, people do tend to be very superstitious. The rest of the day was pretty normal. After dinner, everybody is ready to get to business. On come the cocktails and music. Some blunts are even rolled up, and we all get in a good mood. Eventually, two of our group go missing. We all know they had a thing going on, so we assume they went to find a place to hook up. Suddenly, the couple returns. They want to know who's playing the drums outside. We have no idea what they're talking about. They claim that they were walking around, and they began hearing this drum, coming from somewhere around the property. We turn to my friend, whose aunt owned this house, and he says he has no clue. The caretaker went home long ago, so it should just be us. They seemed weirded out. They decided to just join us again. As for us, we were just too drunk to care, to be honest. Next day, we're up late, all of us in different stages of hungover. We fix some quick breakfast and stay inside, playing card games. Somebody brings up the topic of drumming. Theories began flying. We settle on the idea that it must have been some farm machinery from far away. But the guys who heard it were not convinced. There was no other farmhouse for kilometers away. In the afternoon, we were mostly feeling better, so we all decide to go to walk. We head down to the entrance of the property and find the caretaker. One of us asks about the drumming at the night. The caretaker makes a cross on himself. He thinks that it might be the La Caja Ronca, the horse box in English. And there's this local legend about this demonic possession, where supposedly these hooded figures carrying black candles led a carriage with Satan himself sitting on it, holding a thumping, large black box. We all tell him to stop trying to scare us, but he seems genuinely concerned. He starts warning my friend that we should not be spending the night there. He assures him we'll be okay. The caretaker says he'll pray for us, and for no reason, we should approach the procession. In case we see it, he successfully creeped us all out. Fast forward to the night. We're all sitting, playing drinking games, but taking it slower tonight, as nobody wanted to end up wasted as they were yesterday. The music was not as loud. We wanted to have actual conversation. We should not have been able to hear it, though. Boom, boom. Right in the middle of the night, cutting all conversation short. We all get quiet, and a few seconds later, this thumping sound that seemed to come from all around the house. We all huddle together and turn down the music. The sound again, deafening. It seemed to be shaking the entire house. Somebody begins crying. One of my friends panics and begins asking, "What is that?" We tell him to shut up. More booming. Now we're practically crapping our pants. The friend that brought us here tells me to go with him outside to see what's happening. I'm scared, so I suggest we all go together. They refuse. It's just me and him going outside. We open the door, and the booming is even louder, as if a speaker from some meters away were playing it. We look around, scared out of our minds and trying to see if we find the source and hoping we don't. But we do, I pointed out. Many meters away, around the horse stables, tiny lights are flickering, as if they were candles. We squint. They are candles, and they're being held by these hooded silhouettes, walking right in front of another figure. It was large, way taller than a human, and pitch black, blacker than a normal silhouette would be. It seemed as it could reflect no light at all, and he carried something. He gave it a stroke. There it was, unmistakable, the booming sound. We fled right there inside the house, told everybody to pack up their stuff. We packed everything in like 5 minutes, getting in the car. The whole time, the booming seemed to be getting stronger. My friend started the car and we left the property. As we left, I could still feel the sound right on the back of my neck. I didn't dare look back. We drove straight back and we all stayed on our friend's house, unwilling to go back home till the next day. The next day, his aunt called, wanting to know if we were okay. The caretaker had asked her to check on us. He told her everything. She knew about these things, so she believed us. Then she told him that something chilled me to the bone. When the caretaker got there the next day, all horses were dead. No injuries apparent, just dead. Like they had died of fright, just dropping dead where they were. I don't know what this could have been, but we're still terrified of it to this day, and never going back there. I was driving on the Arizona highway in the afternoon. I never like driving long distances at night, even less alone, and there are lots of freaky stories about what happens here in the desert. My best friend had recently moved to another town with her family. We were both 22, and the plan was to visit them, spend the night there, and return home the next afternoon. I must say, I'm pretty confident about my driving. I'm very detail-oriented, and while it might sound like a pain to some friends and family, it also helped me a lot. The gas tank was full, and I'm accustomed to driving my car. When you live in a small town in Utah, you just have to do it. I was on State Route 89, west of the Grand Canyon. It was Saturday. It's not like there were many people around. Some just like traveling or visiting with their friends, relatives, or partners on weekends. I'd see a few cars and vans every once in a while. My friend had moved to Williams. I was driving there from Flagstaff, just listening to the radio and enjoying the scenery around me. The trip could only take 2 hours and a half, in worst case scenario. At some point, my radio went off, but things seemed fine. So, I just went on driving. It was broad daylight. If something weird was going on, I'd see it. Sometimes the signal would not work. At the side of the road, I saw something moving. It was then when I realized it was a cat with a collar and a leash. I knew some cat owners like to take their cats for walks. I remember reading about it, but you can't tell me that's a normal thing to see out here in the middle of nowhere, especially a cat. I knew some people like to abandon their pets on roads, but to do it in the middle of the desert was basically a death sentence. So, I stopped the car and tried to get the cat, which was scared and nervous. I had to struggle a bit. I never stopped looking back at the car, in case somebody came driving to catch it, but I had to yank its leash. The cat was scared and hissing. I was wearing a small cardigan, wrapping it around her. She was a beautiful calico, making sure she wouldn't scratch me as I carried her back to the safety of my vehicle. That's when I saw them. Plastic trash bags. They were green and black, and blood was dripping out of them. There were large red stains across the trash bags and around the dirt. It was crude and sudden and violent. I couldn't explain it. My stomach twisted. I noped out of there away from there. It was a place too far away from civilization, so I just ran into panic in the car, basically opening the door, throwing the cat inside, driving as fast as I could. I remember the scary state of fear I had as I drove to the nearest place. Turns out it was a truck stop. The lady behind the counter looked at me as if I was crazy. I rushed to explain everything and called the police. Who kidnaps somebody and their cat, murders the owner, and leaves the pet alone? For some reason, I thought about a girl, but then everybody can have a cat. So, the cops come. Truck drivers and a few customers see it all with their nosy faces, and we all return to the creepy place that I struggled to find. In the end, the police did a thorough search. I ended up sleeping in a motel. They let me go the next afternoon. My friend was super weirded out. The cat stayed with the cops, I guess, as she had a collar and leash and would be used as evidence. To this day, I still don't know what happened out there, but I know that whoever was in those bags had been brutally murdered. By who, though, I'll never know. I had my first and last scary and unexplainable experience when I was just about 18 or 19 years old. Me and a few friends used to love hanging around quiet and deserted places, like deep in the forest or even abandoned old buildings when urban exploring. We would sit together, drink and joke around. We always had a lot of fun. This one time, we decided to explore this bit of forest that we had never gone to before, taking a new path out there. We did not like to sit under the trees. We were always worried about ticks, so we went until we could find a large meadow to set up there and camp for the night. Just to point out, we aren't really avid outdoorsmen or campers. We didn't really bring enough gear with us. Only some lighter material, just enough equipment to make a fire, have a tent, and a few cigars. We weren't planning on sleeping out there for several nights, just one. And then, in the morning, after we were done exploring, we would go back home. This time, we had walked for a very long time, well over several hours. We even discussed going back because it had gotten too far. About 10 more minutes later, we finally found a large meadow where we could sit down. The grass was perfect, short enough that we could make a fire and try and keep the bugs away at night. I know the smoke helps with mosquitoes. This little patch of woods was always safe. It always felt serene and perfect. No dangerous animals, and there aren't many smaller ones either, like deer or rabbit, meaning there should be no reason for predators to be around. There's just a lot of insects, and a lot of thick brush and trees. A perfect place to be kind of netted in by the wilderness. After settling down, I noticed a small cavern in the distance. It wasn't completely dark yet, and so, even though we didn't have the ample gear for spelunking, we decided to go check it out, hoping to find maybe something interesting inside. To our disappointment, there was nothing. It was just a small empty space. So we went back to our spot, moving on with the night. The sun had now set completely. We were playing card games and drinking a little. I needed to go and empty my bladder, so I walked a short distance so the others would not hear me, and began letting out my stream. About halfway through, when I was done with peeing, I heard this weird crackling sound in the distance. It kind of reminded me of bones breaking mixed with a firework going off. Strange. The moon was also full that night, so we had decent enough illumination that it wasn't completely pitch black. We actually had some light in the forest. I'm looking around and specifically in the way of the sound, and I thought I saw something moving. It wasn't sinister or evil, like a monster or a bigfoot, but it appeared to be a normal-sized human in the forest. I immediately thought it was somebody out here watching us, that they had followed us and were planning on doing something bad. After all, who would come by themselves and follow us out here if they weren't planning on doing something bad? I decided to ignore it and nope out of there, zipping back up and going back to the tent. We tried to continue and have fun for the next hour or two, while I completely ignored what I just saw, figuring it would be better if I didn't mention anything. I didn't want to make my friends paranoid. A few of my friends actually dozed off and fell asleep from the booze. Only me and a friend, who I'll call Mike, drank a lot, and that evening, we were still somehow awake. We were talking about Metal Gear Solid and other video games, like some older PS2 titles, when a loud noise interrupted us. It kind of reminded me of an animal getting caught in a trap and hurting. It was a very high-pitched noise, but it came from quite a distance away. Mike and I were pretty freaked out there for a second, checking to see if any of the others had woken up. They were still sound asleep. The booze had really taken a number on them. They were out cold. The sound wasn't stopping though, and we agreed to check it out, thinking that the poor animal needed help. We had walked for about 5 minutes before we got close to the sound, which was by then very quiet and weak. We thought the animal was dead, assuming that's what it was. Maybe a rabbit. I know when they get a distress call, they sound like dying or screaming. By this point, we were now in the middle of the woods. We didn't exactly know how to get back to where we were. It was too dark. We looked around and noticed this red light, glowing just a few trees ahead of us. We began feeling very uneasy and scared, so we figured we might sneak up a little to have a better look, because, we were curious. The sighting shocked us. No more than 10 feet from us was this old man, appeared to be dressed in robes, holding a large knife. Under him was a small deer, a doe, actually, that didn't look fully grown, but not quite a fawn. It was kind of squealing in pain, and the man appeared to be slowly cutting it, cupping the blood that came out of its body and sipping it. The scene made us sick to our stomachs. We were too afraid to move, so we just stayed still and watched. After another moment, the man stayed still, finally standing up and cleaning his bloody mouth. Somehow, he didn't seem to notice us, so he turned off the red light and began moving in our direction. We remained still, deciding when the right moment was to run. It was too dark to see, and then we see a camera flash go off, like one of those old Kodak cameras, multiple times. The sicko was taking pictures of us, and every time there's a flash, it would illuminate enough around us. There were multiple dead deer, all with their throats slashed, and weird symbols carved into the trees in blood. I aggressively grabbed Mike by his shirt, and we just began running. We could hear the man now shouting and almost growling like a wild man. I think he was trying to catch up to us. Luckily, we were both faster, managing to reach our friends quickly, shaking them violently to try to wake them up as fast as we possibly could. Now we felt a bit safety, since there was more of us, but we still picked up the pace, throwing everything into the truck, dousing out the fire. The next day, we went to the police immediately, and we told them exactly what we had seen. I guess they went out there to look and found nothing, other than a few dead deer carcasses, with their throats slit exactly as we had said, but no signs of anybody. From that day, we stopped going to that forest, and now we spend a lot more time hanging out around our own places, and are more careful in where we choose to go for urban exploration. To this day, I'm still scared of going off to venture into the woods. I mean, can you blame me? This isn't something I normally talk about. When I was 18, male, I traveled with 2 friends around. We went to the Altamaha Regional Park in Georgia. There were my friend, 19, and his girlfriend, 18. We just wanted to hike, talk, smoke weed, and drink if we could. By night, we decided to set up camp by one of the meanders of the Altamaha River. The general idea was to sleep by the place because we thought it would be cool to hear the river's noise or something like that. I remember it was very late. We had the radio turned on, just grunge music, and we're chatting about stuff, vibing. The scenery was very green, full of trees and lots of thicket. That's pretty common for this time of year. People fish on weekends, and we crossed a group of men with their fishing rods at night. They were probably searching for a good place. The thing is, it's very dark out here, and there were strange sounds, but that's normal when you're outdoors. And we were a bunch of idiotic teenagers. So, for some dumb reason, we felt like sitting by the river, taking a small bath in there. No swimming, just playing with the water at 3 a.m. Now, I realized it was almost as if we were looking for trouble on purpose. Do you know that feeling When you have listened to so many songs, you can almost separate it from the sounds of your surroundings. Like, we suddenly realized something was odd. Outside of the music, something was out of place. I was not the only one with the feeling. My friend and I stared at each other with serious expressions, and his girlfriend seemed worried too. She left the river. When we turned around, we saw this big oval figure emerge from the middle of the water. It was really big. It's not uncommon to see sturgeons and other fish in the area, but we understood something was coming and immediately left the water. And so, a thing raised its head from the black waters. Just a little. Enough for us to see a long snout, like a caiman or a crocodile's. 2 yellow protruding eyes. It immediately went down the water again. But it was not a crocodile, nor a sturgeon or something else. It did not try to harm us. It simply swam past our campsite towards the east. But we all saw it. From what we knew, the Tama Native American tribe has legends about a creature like that one, and the Scotting settlers talked about a Nessie similar creature. Whatever it was, we nearly had a close encounter with it. That's all I'm going to say. Back in the early 2000s, I worked on an excavation team in South America. We had found various remains of ancient civilizations, tribes, and underground temples from cultures there. While many of these sites had been known about for a long time, hundreds of years if not more, we were the ones actually sent in to thoroughly investigate and potentially restore these sites for tourism attractions, and to explore and discover any other archaeological evidence there would be holding. This does include things like artifacts, ancient gemstones, and any other relics that we can find still left, a figment of time. I've always heard numerous scary stories where people have claimed to have heard their own names being called, or encountered something from beyond the grave, or otherworldly. However, I never really gave them too much thought, and neither did I know that I would have any such experience. I had planned to take a trip to visit an old relic site that was more so recently discovered in the past 100 years. The excitement had engulfed me, and I pushed all thoughts of the supernatural off to the back of my mind. After all, this was far more exciting than it was scary. I packed my gear and set off to the location. The crowd was astounding. Nobody has expected such a large number of enthusiastic people. Excitement was all over their faces, especially those who had come with the intention to steal treasure or two, since relic treasures were well sought after, and their value was above normal. My intentions, though, were vastly different, as I was there only to witness the glory and magnificence of the tribe who had once inhabited the place. As we entered in droves, the wealth of former denizens were displayed in full glory for all to see. This blatant and arrogant display of wealth awed everybody. Some people had the light of greed flashing across their faces. Clearly, it was becoming hard for them to suppress their greed. I shook my head in disdain and snorted coldly before proceeding to other locations in the relic. I came across so many artifacts, other sorts of treasures. I was about to step into another hall when my eyes strayed towards it, the object that caused my downfall. I had thought I had a strong will to resist greed, but all of my moral senses crumbled at that moment. I felt this intense urge to rush toward it, where it was resting on. This discovery made me break out in a cold sweat. A mere treasure could be so powerful. I desperately fought back, but efforts was like a mantis trying to stop a car. Clearly useless. After struggling intensely, the treasure's will dominated mine, and I rushed up towards the platform. I could see what the treasure was. A jade mask, adorned with different gems and different markings. This time around, the urge came back. It was telling me to pick it up and put it on. I fought back once again, but ultimately, I picked up the mask and put it on my face. At that moment, I felt space warping and I was transported to a new location, vastly different from the relic site. This new place had a very intense aura of death and desolation. I decided to roam the new place as I had no other choice. I needed to formulate an escape plan, but I can't do that without seeing what the world was like. I never knew the stories I had heard from locals about people playing out right in front of me. At this moment, I'd been in here for 3 days already. 3 days of hellish torture, and I was already gaunt and had grown leaner, nearly dying of lack of water and feeling starved. During those 3 days, I could hear my name being called over and over. And the first time it happened, I was elated, rushing up to the location immediately. But what I saw gave me the chills. There were different insignia, sigils, and markings, all covered in blood. It was at that moment I had heard a cool voice behind me, asking me if I would like to join them. I let out a scream and took to my heels. The same voice I had heard let out this deep, demonic laughter, reverberating all throughout. I knew it was the spirit. Its powers were evil and terrifying to the extreme. I was put through all sorts of mental anguish in its twisted dimension. I desperately sought for death. I kept seeing the sigils and insignia that were coated in blood. I decided to rest for a bit and found myself running for my life. As I fell down to sleep, I heard a scream. It sounded like human more than it did anything else. And then, this iota of confidence came over me. I even felt myself dying, being taken out of my body as a spirit, and the next thing I knew, everything went black. I remembered tidal waves of blood, terror and nightmares, demons all around me, and lots of fire, and worse, that same maniacal, demonic laughing that I'd heard in that ruined temple. And the next thing I know, I came to, my body limp on the ground where I still had the jade mask. And even though it was our job to go in and retrieve these relics and sigils, I wanted nothing more than it destroyed. This place had clearly been cursed and hexed, which was common for many of the natives back then to protect their treasure with. After all, I know the Egyptians would do similar things for protecting their tombs from robbers. Why wouldn't the cultures and indigenous here do the same thing of many years ago? For the time being, I've had to sign some papers that I can't really talk about my experience. And what I've already told you is far too much. I guess this story is more of a spiritual experience than anything else. And I apologize for not being the world's best writer, because it probably comes off as a crudely written horror story by what you'd probably think is an 8th grader. I could really care less what you think. I'm just here to try and get this story off my chest, and hopefully, even though I've signed some papers, this doesn't get traced back to me. This has been living inside of me for so long, and I've been really needing to get this out. Lindsay, Jonathan, and I. The names have been changed, of course, just FYI. Had always enjoyed hiking, exploring, and camping, be it in the Andes Mountains, the pyramids, or the small forest behind Jonathan's complex. We had pledged to explore them all, no matter how much it would take, no matter how old we had to become or how far we had to travel. It was our duty. It was our lifelong goal. We 3 have been best friends since, well, college. All are well settled into our own respective careers and, fortunately, very financially independent. So, an impulsive 2 to 3 week trip every 6 months was never an issue. All of us were also single at the time, although Jonathan did have occasional girl trouble. Luckily, that never stopped him from going with us. The freedom spectrum was pretty well. This was then. Now, all of us are married. Things are somewhat different. But Jonathan, remember how I said he gets girl trouble? He recently got divorced, so he's free again. If anyone's curious, this happened right around 2011 or 2012. Anyway, so one day, Lindsay came to us with the idea of exploring the Himalayas. We couldn't have been more excited. After planning thoroughly and swearing to find out the secret of the Yeti, we decided to book our trip. Jonathan suggested we freestyle it and kind of just figure out as we go. But Lindsay and I wanted to get a guide, going with a travel group. Trekking and camping out in one of the largest mountain ranges of the world had been far too dangerous for us to just freestyle and wing it. We could use travel facilities with the group. We booked our trip, connected with our travel partners, and patiently waited for the day of our departure. The slot was for October. We had a few months to kill. Well, the day finally came, and we landed. The trek wasn't for another couple of days, so we checked into the nearest hotel, exploring the city for a while, before finally visiting the office of the agency. That's when the uneasiness began. Hours before we had met up with the group, I began to feel unwell. It wasn't something like weakness or fever, and I don't know how to describe it, except that I simply felt uneasy in the stomach and a little heavy. I guess it was similar to the way you feel when you have an exam the next day, or when you have a presentation due, but you're not prepared, combined with depression. I had never been nervous for a trip before, and we had some pretty wild rides, so it felt weird. Anyway, I tried to shrug it off and just enjoy our trip. We met with our guide and the other travelers. I guess there were about 14 people in total. We had already been in touch for a while since we all had been added to the Himalayan trek, but it is far more fun to meet in person. After being briefed with the itinerary for the trek, over a hot cup of tea and making some small talk with others, we left for our hotel room, getting all of our gear. We were leaving for the site the next day by car. The uneasiness had somewhat subsided, but the next day, it came back in full force, and it came back stronger. Lindsay probably saw that I had been rather quiet throughout the trip, but I evaded her questions. I was not going to be the guys. I know the trip we had been looking forward to since months had just started, but I don't feel well. Guy. I would never hear the end of it. My friends would have taken care of me and probably suggested returning home, but they would never have let me hear the end of it. After a lot of hours in the car, seeming like days, and on foot, we reached the first portion of base camp. The area was cold and full of snow, and we could see the high snow-covered cliffs. It was like a scene from a movie, beautiful and like another world. I'd suggest you make a trip there if you can. The guide showed us to our own tent, told us where the canteen and dinner table and all those other things were. Lindsay and I sat on a nearby bench with a couple of people, while Jonathan went to get some tea. I was acting normal, I guess, but I'm pretty sure Lindsay could notice something was wrong. She always could. Around the afternoon, we were told of the first milestone of the trek. We were to hike for about 3 kilometers on this huge cliff in front of us, to where they had another camp set up. Despite the now stagnant, weird feeling from before, I felt very energetic. The view was beautiful, the noodles were good, and the trek would be exhausting enough for a great nap. I looked forward to it. The excitement turned into dread about 1 kilometer in, when I remembered just how hard it was to climb a mountain. I was the last one in the line, holding onto guiding rope pretty weakly. At least the nap was going to be great, I thought. Jonathan had been a sprinter and a swimmer in college. I'm pretty sure he still participated in the occasional triathlon. Lindsay was also into CrossFit. He has the stamina of an ox. Me, well, I'm a pretty big guy, so long distances combined with elevation do not bode well with me. A guy can be a couch potato and also like traveling to mountains. Back off. So anyway, here I was, wishing for the trip to be over with, and I saw my mother in the distance. I did not black out or have a dream or imagine her. It was actually my mother. I have no clue what she could be doing here, in the middle of a mountain range, 5,000 plus miles from home, but it was her. I stopped and focused, thinking, I'm so confused. She was wearing her favorite nightgown, looking towards the peak of a nearby mountain. Literally impossible in that cold. I had never hallucinated before, and it was far too little of height for there to be a lack of oxygen that would make any brain go fuzzy. Was I actually sick? I called out to her. She did not respond. I called out to her again, but she turned her back to me and began walking away. I called to her once again and almost left the rope to follow her when a trek guide stopped me. I told him I'd just seen my mother. He shook his head and calmed me down. He told me to keep moving forward in a very serious, calm tone, and that if I see something or somebody else, ignore it. Kind of scared at this point, I blindly followed his advice. That couldn't have been my mom anyway. It was not possible. Perhaps I was sick. I told what had happened to Jonathan and Lindsay when we met at camp a few hours after. One of the guides, Vatsal, joined in the conversation, offering me some insight. Apparently, I had seen some form of a demon or a spirit. Although rare, there had been reports of tourists feeling unwell, and later seeing a loved one. The demon or spirit basically latched on a tourist and impersonated a loved one of theirs to lure them towards the edge. Had I followed it at the time, my death would have been certain. Needless to say, the story terrified the crap out of me. I wanted to call BS, but I hadn't told anybody about the heavy feeling of uneasiness. So, Vatsal's story kind of held up. He talked to a few people at the camp and gave me a black pendant on a red thread to wear around my neck, and another one to wear as a bracelet. He told me that the stones were holy and protect me. I decided to cut the trip short. Jonathan and Lindsay came back with me, despite me asking them not to. So I did become that guy, unfortunately. I told my mom about it, but she thought I was high on that Himalayan weed, which I didn't even know was a thing, and just laughed it off. I had stashed the bracelet away, but I still wear the stone around my neck. The uneasiness went away as soon as I left, but I'm not risking it. Guys, take some advice from me. If you see somebody you know in the middle of literally nowhere, and it's not possible they could be there, it's not them. Do not follow them. It is an imposter spirit. I can't tell exactly what I saw there, but if I could, I'm not sure you would not believe in my words. I believe that what was trying to kill me that day was not an animal or a natural being. Not sure if it could possibly be that thing that had been born on Earth. I remembered the sound, and after 2 years of searching for any known animal sound on this planet, I concluded that this thing does not belong here. It was a demon, or an alien, something that must be destroyed. I will start telling everything to you, from the beginning, of course. You can call me Alan, just a regular high school student. I was going with some friends to another place, but kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a recipe for 4 teenagers to go and die, but that's simply not the case. See, we made our way out quite a ways. I wish I could tell you where we went, but I couldn't because we drove for probably about 3 or 4 hours, all the way across the state, to a place I don't even know. We stopped at a gas station, I remember, getting some beer and some chips. I remember the attendant didn't even bother IDing us. We're all 17 and 18. The youngest 16. I don't even think he cared, if we're honest. But either way, we had beer, chips and good food, and ready to go snack out and camp out. I think the plan was, looking back, that we were just supposed to pull into a random spot. Not like an actual campsite, you know, where there's a host and you have a water spigot and all that, and all the wonderful camping commodities. We wanted to rough it being out in the middle of nowhere so we can drink in peace and not be bothered by police. I remember we had just pulled off onto the side of the road somewhere and maybe walked, I don't know, a quarter mile into the forest, where we found a decent enough clearing to decide to make up our tent. So that's exactly what we did. We made a very small fire. Zach was the one who knew all that. I couldn't make a fire to save my life, but he's the one that set up our tent and made the fire, and we even brought hot dogs. So we started roasting that traditional camping style, on a stick and talking and making jokes. It was then we decided to share scary stories. Ivan started talking about zombies, and Zach began talking about aliens and spirit possessions. Of course, they were entertaining, but boring for the most part. We laughed and decided to get out the beers. After all, what's a night out for teenagers if there can't be alcohol involved? Well, sooner or later, I think all of us began to notice this stink, and we were looking around making jokes like who farted, you know, typical teenager boy stuff. But the smell wasn't like that of a bad fart. It stunk really bad. And the more we smelt it, the more we kind of realized it smelled like death, like rotting meat. I remember complaining, thinking, oh great, somebody has used this site as a trash dumping place and probably dumped a bunch of raw meat. But what we found would be much, much worse. The sun was already down in the sky at this point, so the light was pretty poor, except for the light of the fire. We had our phones with us, so that would provide enough light from the flashlight app that we all had. This was before phones had the built-in flashlight feature, so you actually had to download an app from the Play Store to get it. With our flashlight phones on, we began searching for the source of the smell, which seemed to be coming from all around us. But surely there had to be a reason. The smell was not there when we had just begun setting up, or at least we didn't notice it, and we did not understand why. Walking a ways back behind our tent, the smell now was getting stronger. We had a lead. That's a good thing. Maybe we could at least find out what it is. Zach suggested that maybe a deer had died or something else had died, and was just now beginning to rot. Maybe this way we can kind of kick it away. I don't know what I thought. I don't think it was too much later until we saw what it was. A body, hanging from a tree by a rope. The person had been skinned. Their flesh and innards had been dumped in a pile, maybe 2 or 3 feet away on the ground. All of us instantly began vomiting, and it wasn't just because of the beer we drank. Ivan started crying. We had just come upon the body of a murder victim, somebody who was more than likely tortured. We had no choice but to call the police immediately, getting back to the main road. Forget our camping trip. Screw it. This changes everything. We spent about 30 minutes getting back to the main road where we actually had reception. Shaking and crying, we called the police, telling them what we'd found. We waited there on the side of the road for probably about 12 minutes before the first officer arrived. He began asking us a bunch of questions, mainly about the alcohol. And yeah, we got scolded quite a bit for that. But I think the officers who arrived kind of let it go, under the guise we give them all the information we need and tell them what we knew. We have no idea what happened or what became of the body we had found. After police had got there, they told us to pack up and leave, and they would handle the rest. Still stands out to me as one of the most terrifying nights of my life. The fact that we actually saw a serial killer murdered victim who was tortured in heinous ways. I've never shared this story before with anybody, but I thought everybody would think I'm crazy. I've decided to share it now. It was the summer of 2019. I went to Malaysia for vacation with my family. It was a really fun trip, except for one scary event that had happened. I won't be able to forget it. It was that traumatizing. It all happened. I thought I was brave and courageous, like the main characters you see in most movies. After all, protagonists are meant to be unfearing. One day, we went to the Taman Negara Forest, which is a very popular tourist attraction. It is 130 kilometers big, and it's so old that people believe it used to be home to dinosaurs. As we were exploring the park, I, the most adventurous person who thought it would be fun to go deeper into the forest, I wandered off away from my family, ended up in the part of the forest where I was all alone. As I continued walking deeper, the quietness increased. There were less cricket noises and almost no birds in this part of the forest. The loneliness and quietness of this area creeped me out, so I tried to find any sight of humans. I could find a way out and not be alone in this unknown place. After a few minutes of trying to trace back my steps, I started hearing my name being whispered, and it sent chills down my spine. The voice was not that of a human. It kind of had a melody to it and seemed to match the description of the voices of sirens. I ignored the voice, calling me towards it, and started going away from it. The voices then increased, from one whisper to 2, then to 3, and all I could hear was my name overlapping each other over and over. My head began shaking to stop hearing these voices. I took out my headphones, connecting them to my phone, and started listening to my music. I couldn't hear the voices over my music, so I continued to go back to where I came from, when suddenly, a tree branch had fell 2 meters away from me and had a dead, decaying animal on top of it. It scared me. I began sprinting and crying, shouting for my mother. After a few moments of running and screaming, I was finally able to let out a large sigh of relief when I heard her voice calling me back. I followed it, thankfully reuniting with my family. I did not tell them what had happened. I was hysterically crying and just assumed I was crying because I'd got lost. After that incident, I never wanted to go into the jungle again, especially older ones, which are rumored to be homes of supernatural entities and creatures. It was a rare weekend when I had no college homework, so I decided to go to my hometown, visit my family over the weekend. I was feeling homesick for quite some weeks, and was terribly missing my mother and her amazing cooking, not to mention my annoying little siblings and watching soccer with my father. College really made me appreciate things that I found annoying at home, and greatly unappreciated them. On Friday evening, I packed my bags, loaded them in my car, and connected my phone to the car speaker, only to play songs. Then I began driving, hoping to find no traffic since it was already an 8-hour drive. You might be thinking, why did not just take a train? Well, the train system here is very crappy, and they always seemed overbooked. It's a lot of people in a small space, and the washrooms are always, well, stinky. Anyway, I kept driving for around 3 hours, after which I got very tired and decided to take a break and rest my eyes. I refueled my car, bought some sandwiches from the gas station. I drove a little further from the gas station and I parked my car at the side of the road, hoping it was not a no parking zone. I wasn't too worried as nobody was around to tell me otherwise. Perhaps I should have been worried. Nobody was around. But I stupidly decided it would be amazing to rest my eyes in the middle of nowhere. I was very tired, so resting my eyes turned into me falling asleep. The next time I opened them, I could hear a tapping sound, as if somebody was knocking on my window. When I looked towards my window, my blood turned cold. What I saw was not human, not even an animal. It looked alien-like. I could see its football-like body and its head. It had long stick-like arms, and they were knocking on the window continuously. I was scared, shocked, and amazed all at the same time, so I kept staring at it, feeling that I was safe as long as I was in the car. It soon got angry because of my staring and began pounding on my window with both hands, trying to open my car door. This made me snap back into reality, and the thought of being kidnapped by a supernatural creature set in, and I quickly began starting my car, speeding away. I kept driving through the whole night, only stopping for gas. I certainly didn't want to encounter something like that again. I reached my family house near dawn and didn't tell them of the creature that I saw. They probably wouldn't believe me. Also, it would have been embarrassing to tell them what I had seen. They probably would have thought I had an overactive imagination, had watched too many horror or sci-fi films. Anyway, that's my story, and take it as you will. I'm still just trying to process what I've experienced. I was on the phone with my friends Kim and Nancy, and they were talking about how stressed out they were during school. Kim had been going through a lot since her last breakup. She could not get over the fact that he left her for her younger sister. It was the summer of 2008, when me and my friends were stressing about school. So we tried making a planned trip to Mexico before the finals, or maybe gonna go take a hike. We asked everybody what you would do to bond, and we all agreed a hike would be best. We planned a trip and went to take one. We brought everything we needed. We were packed and ready to go. Nancy said, "Do you know what route we're going to travel on so we don't get lost?" We got everything planned. Just be ready at 8 a.m. The next day came, and I said bye to my mother. I remember arguing with my parents. They did not want us to go. She'd rather us go to Mexico. When she told me to be safe because she heard on the news people going missing near the mountains, we were talking about the hike. There were 8 of us, and I told her that should be fine. We were all very excited to take this hike. We had been very stressed with school, and we all needed to clear out our heads before the finals. When we arrived, we had never seen such beautiful mountains. Just gazing upon them in their beauty, I told Lisa that it would be amazing to watch the sunrise. My friend Nancy said it would be an amazing idea too, and we all agreed. So, we split into 2 groups. As we were doing so, going through the scenery, the sky began to darken. We all tried to check our phones so we could see if it was going to rain, but nobody had service. We decided to just follow the path and continue on our hike. I was preoccupied with taking pictures of everything I'd seen. The professor suggested that this was the best place to clear your head before the big exam. And boy, he was right. Frank saw something flying across the sky but did not know what it was. Lisa said she had heard some man yell, "Jojo, come back when you need to come home." Lisa had asked us if we had heard somebody say Jojo, and we'd said no. Maybe you need to stop drinking though. She had claimed she had not had a drink in 10 years. We all looked at each other, trying to find out who said Jojo. That was not a familiar voice that any one of us had heard before. It was strange. We tried to see if we could pick up the signal to inform the others. Again, going along the trail to the mountain, I saw something on the top. I did not have my glasses on and it was hard to see with the fog. Frank said I didn't know what way to go. Does anybody know how to get back to the others? I said to Lisa, "Do you have a copy of the map so we can get back? I'm really over this trip already." We began screaming everybody's name. We didn't have any signal, and we could not hear them or see them. As we're walking, we could not unsee what we had seen. And my parents, in a way, were right. We should have never taken this trail. Frank explained the professor was wrong and there's nothing peaceful about what we just saw. How we're going to explain to the others what happened? Mark had a whole bunch of cuts all over his face, but God knows what. We all began running in different directions, hoping to find the other. The entire time, we were crying out for the others to see if we can locate them, and they're nowhere in sight. Lisa began screaming while we were stuck in the middle of nowhere. We have no way to get home, and I do not know which way to get home. We reached to a point where we had a bar. We called Nancy. I heard her phone ringing, but she was nowhere. Frank explained how we were stranded, and half of our friend groups were already gone. It was an entire disaster. We just wanted to go home. It was getting darker now. We had not seen or heard from our friends. We were stranded. I told them we have no choice but to call the police. We can't hide this from our parents. Our friends are lost, and so are we. We struggled, with our one bar, to make it back to a place where we could call the police and have them help. It was about an hour or two later when they arrived. With search dogs in hand, they discovered that our friends were nowhere to be found. The police were kind enough to take us home. I began crying as soon as I came home. The police told my family what had happened, and that I was very lucky. Out of me and my other friend, most of them went missing. Well, turns out, long after, their bodies were never found. It's as if they simply had just vanished into nothing. I believe that something out there took them. Before I tell you my story, I should give you some context. I'm from the Netherlands. I've been living in Rotterdam for my entire life. It's a great place to grow up in. 2 years ago, my best friends and I decided to go on a little day trip to a village not too far away from us. The village is also known for its beautiful windmills. It's a place in the countryside, and it's UNESCO World Heritage. I really recommend everybody traveling to the Netherlands to visit this beautiful village. It's worth it. A fun fact, the village is also below sea level. They've managed to keep it dry with windmills and waterways. Going for a walk there is a great way to relax and enjoy nature. It's quiet. If you don't want to take beautiful pictures, this is the place to be. The entrance tickets are pretty cheap. Don't mind me advertising my country. I just feel like it's pretty underrated and has a lot more to offer than people think. We visited in October, and it was very cold at the time. The country certainly isn't known for its great weather. Not only was it cold, but it was overcast. We didn't complain though, because most people seem to have decided to stay inside. We were not completely alone, but we did not encounter many people on our walk. Sometime in the afternoon, we were walking, the three of us, by ourselves. The only sound you could hear was the wind. It was pretty loud at that moment, and all of a sudden, it went silent. And when I say completely silent, I mean it. It was so quiet. I looked at my friends. They did not seem to react to the sudden silence at all. That was weird. Anybody would have noticed it. After a few seconds, I heard somebody whisper my name in my ear. It was a woman. Both of my friends are guys, and they were walking on the other side of me. I turned around, but there was nobody there. After that, the sound of the wind came back, louder even. I asked my friends about it afterwards, but they said they didn't know what I was talking about. According to them, the wind had been loud the entire time, so loud that we could barely understand each other. It didn't make any sense. Who whispered my name into my ear then? And why? Why this sudden silence? Why me? I don't think I'll ever be able to explain it, but I wanted to tell my story anyway. I want to know if anybody else experienced something like this, and if they have an explanation or some sort, it would be wonderful to hear it. I still get nervous thinking back about it. About a year ago, I went on a road trip in Wisconsin with my brother. We were planning on driving around for a couple of days. This was before I had moved out of my parents' house to go live by myself. It was our very last chance to take a trip like this, so we were really looking forward to both spending time with each other. Like a goodbye. I know, Wisconsin is not the most exciting place on earth, but we were driving on the Great River Road when my brother really had to pee. I decided to stop on the side of the road, where there was water. This way my brother could pee. There were no other cars around. I had asked him if he wanted to stay there for an hour, so we could eat our lunch, have some coffee, and then take off again. He was happy to do so. Sitting in the car for hours on end isn't very fun. It's also not very healthy either. We're just sitting on the ground, leaning against the car facing towards the water, and I spotted something between the trees on the other side of the water. It was red, and I assumed it was a balloon or some sort of package that traveled there, with the wind. This was not the nicest place. It smelt pretty bad. I wasn't surprised to see all the trash around, but I noticed that whatever was stuck in the trees was holding onto an object. It was a child. There was a child on the other side of the water, with nobody around. I couldn't see the child clearly, but it appeared to be a little girl, wearing a bright green raincoat and a hat. She was looking towards us, staring. I didn't understand how she got there. She wasn't standing there with an adult. She was too young. I called out for her, but she did not answer or even react to my voice. When I looked over at my brother, he looked at me and looked confused. He asked me why I was screaming. That's when I got confused. It was pretty obvious somebody was standing there, and we had been looking in the same direction. When I looked again, the child was gone. There was no one there. The trash was now hanging on a tree. I told him I saw a child and pointed to where she was standing. He thought I was joking around. I reassured him that I was not. He told me I just needed some sleep. I was certain that I was not hallucinating. I even considered calling the police, but my brother convinced me not to. He was certain that there wasn't a child where I thought I had seen one. Later that night, when we were in a room in a hotel not too far away from where this happened, I did some research. I didn't find anybody that matched the girl's description that was missing at the time. I still feel bad about not calling the police back then, but I do feel like maybe I was just really tired, that this was all a big mistake. Either that, or I really did see a ghost or an apparition. Perhaps it was the ghost of a little girl who had died there before. I don't know, the whole thing just feels weird. The fact she didn't respond to me, and I even called out to her. I don't know. Something just feels so off about this. Surely you can understand. Driving through Kansas is the absolute worst. The endless rows of corn and nothingness are enough to drive any sane person mad. Every now and again, you'll see an occasional windmill, breaking the monotony. This is when I found myself excited for windmills. I fished for something, anything, to try and occupy my wondering mental state. Instead of watching corn, I thought over my plans to finally pop the question to my wonderful girlfriend of 2 years. The long distance was beginning to really wear on me, and I'd been secretly applying for jobs in her zip code. Surprise, right? The idea was simple. Get a job, propose, move, you know. It meant leaving behind my roommate. But there was nothing so daunting I could not overcome, if it meant spending my life with Miranda. Besides, we weren't getting any younger. I was so lost in thought that Jason, the man driving, swerved into the other lane, cursing about some crazy lady standing there in the middle of the road. I practically yelped. I spun around in my seat, looking for the woman in question, only to see the road was empty. As night wore on, the travelers dropped off one by one. They were the only ones there, bearing a well-hidden cop or two. When my heart calmed in my chest, I asked, "Do you want me to take over?" But he swore up and down he was fine. He was not hallucinating, that she had been right there. But in the end, he called me a few obscenities and pulled over. I've only ever been driving for 20 minutes when a girl, dressed in a school uniform, gets swallowed whole by my headlights. There was no thump, and even though I slammed on the brakes, I knew I'd hit her. My door swung open. I came tumbling out just in time to see her climbing off the pavement and go sprinting off to the road. I screamed at her to get back here, but she kind of just disappeared down the hill, as if I'd never said a word. I didn't want to chase her into the dark. I feel like it's worth mentioning here that as a man, as white as he was tall, it just didn't feel right or possible to go sprinting after a little girl. But he had definitely hit her with his car. Adrenaline had to be the only reason that she was still standing. He couldn't just let her die out there. She was scared. He'd find her and apologize and hopefully get her to the nearest hospital before she bled out or whatever other injuries she had just acquired. Easier said than done. She'd been moving now, and there was no sign of her. The only lead I had was a dusty set of footprints that had set in what was once mud, like fossils. They led into another cornfield. If not for the injured girl, I imagine lingered within the field. I'd have turned on my heels and dragged my big butt back up that hill. There were few things so spectacular that I thought them worthy of chancing a meeting with an axe murderer. But I had a duty to her. So I swallowed my fear, diving into the corn. Calling out to her was useless. Whoever she was either already dead, or I thought that I'd hit them with malicious intentions. No matter how I introduced myself to the darkness, opening myself up for sneak attacks and dismemberment, she would not reply. I was on the verge of giving up entirely. There was nothing I could do for somebody who wouldn't let me help them, when my ankle caught something solid, and I went sprawling. My chin hit the dirt so hard, I couldn't be sure I did not black out for a moment. But when I came to, I was assaulted by a stench so putrid, it was enough to bring up my dinner in one merciless heave. As if the loss of my dinner were not enough, my phone had also fallen from my hand where I'd fallen. Righting my wrongs was quickly becoming an ordeal. Padding around in my own vomit, searching for a phone that could have gone any inconvenient distance, while my roommate was sleeping in a running car in the middle of nowhere, was not how I imagined spending my night. But then again, I never imagined hitting a teenager either, so I guess tonight really was a wild card. By the time I found my phone, I was content to call an ambulance and simply explain my situation. My chin hurt. This cornfield reeked, and my hands were now covered in dirt and my own vomit. And, to add insult to injury, once I flicked on my flashlight, I found myself sitting hip to hip with the girl in a uniform. Both her legs were broken. Half of her face was eaten away as maggots wriggled along her skin. I don't remember much climbing to my feet and slamming the door to the driver's seat. My heart was rioting in my chest. This is by the time I had already hit the gas, jerking Jason awake in a way that was none too kind. The screeching of our wheels was nothing in comparison to his startled scream, but my tongue was frozen in my mouth. He asked me what was wrong. Those were first words that permeated the cloud clogging my brain, but hearing them didn't mean I could not reply to them. How did I explain that I hit an innocent child, chasing her to the corn, then tripping over her rotting corpse, without seeming completely insane? There was just no way. And worse, how did I explain that I saw her standing by the exit signs, by the food markers? How did I tell Jason, the man I accused of seeing things, that I was not seeing things? I couldn't. So when Jason wouldn't take my silence for an answer, I lied. There was a bear off to the side. Freaked me out, I guess. A large black bear mama with her cubs. It was a lame excuse, a real one, and Jason didn't buy it for a moment. Silence reigned for a moment longer before he sputtered and laid back down. Yeah, right. I bet you saw her too. The rest of the drive was quiet. We did not acknowledge what had happened, and we kind of just hoped to forget about it, never bringing it up. I still talk to Jason sometimes, and it's one of those elephant in the room topics. Even now, typing this out has been very tough for me. Reliving the events of that evening is kind of like a nightmare that won't stop coming back up. So, I just got back from a road trip late last night. It had been like 10 hours, but my hands are still shaking. I've not slept. Me and my dad and my little brother just got back from my grandma's hometown. A little bit about me. I'm a 26-year-old woman who's never liked anything to do with horror or anything related to that genre at all. Since I was young, when I'd become aware of the things that lurk in the dark, I've always got this kind of third eye feeling of some sort. While I can't see ghost or spirit, I swear, I can feel something around like a presence of another person, but it feels wrong. I get goosebumps and sometimes I even feel like fainting, like a lot of negative energy is suddenly thrown at me. My parents, especially my mom, believes in my condition. She's quite the superstitious one, mainly because of how she was raised. So, whenever I tell her that I feel strange around certain places, she would hold my hand and would inaudibly pray in Latin. She made me wear all sorts of decorated talismans and things that have been blessed by a priest. I'm Catholic, by the way. Enough about me. Last Saturday, my father took me and my brother to my grandma's hometown to celebrate my cousin's birthday. Mom was busy with work, so she couldn't make it. This celebration was a lot of fun, a lot of great memories. But when the night came around 7 p.m., a visitor had shown. He was an older man, accompanied by his caretaker. I heard he was my cousin's godfather. Remembering it now, the moment he came, I slowly felt nauseous. My mood was gone and I didn't feel so well. I excused myself and went to the guest room for an early rest. I was drinking at the time. I did not relate it to him, but now I'm certain that when he came home, he brought something else with him, and it followed us on the way home. Next day after the party, my dad drove us back. My grandmother's hometown is located in a small province, so we passed by a lot of remote areas. The trip would take around 6 hours, so I decided to sleep. I didn't really manage to get some rest until around 4 a.m. I would wake up, sleep, and then wake up again. We took off around 11, and when we were 2 hours in the trip, we stopped by this small diner for lunch. I still felt dizzy and not in the mood that I thought I was in. It was a hangover and lack of sleep. But first, my skin crawled for no reason. I looked around. I didn't see anything unusual. It was a public place, so a lot of people were there. I started overthinking things. Then, My bladder, now of all times, just had to go. But since I feel like there's something in that place, I didn't dare go to the bathroom. I held it in, asking my father if we could just eat in the car and go home. He said okay, and we continued on our trip. After about an hour and a half, we passed by the gas station. I could not hold it in anymore, so I asked my dad if we could just stop for a while. I went straight for the bathroom. I passed by two other girls and went inside in one of the cubicles. As I was doing my business, my skin crawled again, and I turned stiff due to the realization that something might be in there with me. I realized how unlucky I am today. First, at the diner, and now in the gas station. Then, I remembered. When I came in, there was two of the girls in the bathroom using the mirror. I felt quite safe. I heard the faucet in the sink turn, and that just solidified my sense of security. I still hurried on finishing my business. When I came out, there was nobody there, but a faucet was turned on. Then, I felt a cold breeze by my feet. It definitely came from inside the stall I was using. I was scared, my heart now beating so fast that I'm close to hyperventilating. It took a lot out of me to finally move. I hurriedly told my father what had happened. He just comforted me, saying things like maybe the girls just left the faucet running and the breeze was my imagination. But I know what I feel and saw. I was on edge the rest of the trip. Finally, a couple of more hours go by and we're almost out of the province area. We drove by this really long road. There were a lot of trees by the roadside. Almost no houses or buildings in sight and very few vehicles on the road. Dad was going quite fast because of the open road, but not exceeding the speed limit. While on the road, my mind was in a mess while looking out the window. I was seated in the back seat alone, in deep thought. I don't really remember what I was thinking about at the time, but while I was blankly staring outside, our car suddenly began slowing down until it stopped at first. I thought it was intentional, but when I heard Dad's pissed voice, I realized it wasn't. Dad parked the car by the roadside, got out, leaving me and my brother inside. My brother also went outside shortly after, stretching his body, leaving me alone. After everything that had happened that day, to be left alone was the last thing that I'd wanted. I reached out to the car handle and pushed, but nothing. It didn't budge. I kept trying. I tried opening the other door, and that would not budge either. I began to panic, slowly. I'm not claustrophobic, but at that time, I felt like I know how it feels. I called my father and brother, but they could not hear me, so I began banging on the window. That got my brother's attention, since he was closer. When he saw me, he must have realized that I was panicking. I saw him walk toward the door and start pulling the door handle. When nothing happened, I saw him start pulling harder. Dad noticed it too. I saw him trying to open the opposite door. While all of this was happening, I suddenly felt a cold breeze by my side. I thought to myself that this can't be. This never happened to me before. I was literally crying already. I clasped the cross around my neck and praying in Latin. I learned it from my mother. After I finished praying, they finally were able to open the door. They dragged me outside and I collapsed on the ground. I could feel cold sweat on my back. The car somehow magically began working again after my father inspected it, like nothing bizarre had happened. As we hit the road again, I was now seated at the front, while my brother was at the back, strongly grasping his cross necklace. I looked at the side mirror subconsciously, and there, I saw something black, in humanoid form but was blurry. It might have just been my imagination, but I swear, this was the demon chasing us, haunting me and trying to possess me. I will never forget this experience, ever. And even writing this down is still very, very traumatizing. I learned that you can't beat a GPS when it comes to discovering shortcuts. Unfortunately, for me, I had to learn the hard way. After spending 2 whole months away from my girlfriend, I was ecstatic to see her. We did go to different colleges, so we did not get to spend as much time together as we'd like. But now it was spring break, and I was driving all the way out to Arizona to see her. It was a far drive from my dorm back in California. 12 hours, actually. But it was worth it. Around 8, I had begun getting tired, not wanting to waste my time staying at a hotel. I decided my best option would be to find a way to get there quicker. I parked the car on the side of the road and got on my phone, looking up a shortcut. After doing some digging, I found one. I started to take the route, and the built-in navigational system that came with the car heavily advised against it. It was against my best judgment, but I turned it off, turned the radio on. I tapped the steering wheel, along to the drum pattern, nodding my head. Every 30 minutes, I kept driving. I would think to myself, only so much longer until you're there with her. This really made the drive better. That was until I stopped recognizing the signs and the scenery around me. I had no clue how long it would be until I got there. I kept on going. I didn't trust my surroundings enough to stop my car. But it wasn't until I spent about an hour driving around aimlessly that I needed to stop. As crappy 20-year-old cars usually do, mine began to act up. And believe me, I've been around some cars that have been well taken care of. They run great, but mine, not so much. I pulled over at a conveniently placed, dimly lit gas station. The horrible-sounding speakers were blaring Doors songs. I got out, and the man working at the counter had a hat with rips and a white t-shirt that was decorated by what I assumed to be a cup of coffee and a bumpy road. "Hey, do you know where I can get a phone?" I'd asked. Without speaking, he raised his hand and pointed to the phone booth that I was ashamed of myself for missing. I nodded thank you and walked over to it. So I called her on the phone to tell her I was going to be a little late. It wasn't until she asked me if there was a motel I could sleep at that I realized there was nothing around. It was as if I was in a simulation, and the only thing that loaded in was a gas station and dirt. I told her I was going to have to call her back, walking back over to the attendant. I told him I'm sorry for bothering you again, but where are we? He kind of just had a laugh and told me we're in paradise. Flashed a smile at me. I asked him how we get out. His smile faded and pointed behind me. "Just take this road until you get to the canal, then take a left." He turned around and went back to his paper. I hated that I needed to, but I needed to talk with him once more. "Well, my car is saying that it needs oil. Is there a place somewhere around here that I can get that done?" He just turned around and sighed. "I got the stuff at my house to do it for you. Follow me." He led me to his car. I know I shouldn't have done it, but I got in this stranger's vehicle. We drove for about 5 minutes before making any conversation. Actually, it was mostly quiet, until we got to his house. He turned to me and told me to come inside. Bad idea, right? Right. As soon as I got to the door, my nose was in unexplainable pain. The stench coming from this man's house made my eyes water. He must have noticed my expression because he explained to me that his wife was cooking. I lied and said I couldn't even tell, and we kept on walking. As we got to the staircase, he told me to stay downstairs as he went up. I waited for 3 minutes or so before I got impatient, and I began to look around. I went into the living room. It was thrashed, things thrown everywhere, and some red substance all over the curtains. I tried to ignore it, and there was a knife on the floor. My eyes widened, and I ran out of the room, going back to the staircase. I heard him walking out of the upstairs room. If he would have known that I'd wandered off and saw what I did. Thinking quickly, I walked fast to the kitchen. If I have a conversation with his wife, he'll think she called me over, and he won't ask any questions, I thought. Well, while I was walking over there, I thought to myself, what if she's in on it? And I couldn't help but shiver. I got to the kitchen and his wife wasn't there. I looked around. There was no back door for her to walk out of. I looked down at the huge pot on the stove that was bubbling over on the floor. It looked like some sort of stew. But what was worse was all over the kitchen was blood. It stunk. I gagged and almost vomited. I stepped back to lean up against the wall for support, but to my surprise, the wall was practically missing, just pieces of ripped up and torn drywall. I heard the man make his way down the stairs, entering the kitchen to find me. He stopped and stared at me, and kind of snickered, and he said, "I told you, my wife is cooking." And the next thing he did completely shocked and scared me. This man was clearly insane, out of his mind. He walks over to the boiling pot of stew, picks it up with both his hands and pours it all over himself, screaming in agony as the boiling stew literally boiled his skin. I got up and ran out of the front door. I quickly jumped back in my vehicle and flying out of there down the road, back in the direction of the gas station. When I pulled back in, I jumped on the payphone calling the police, telling them what exactly had happened. Well, I'll skip all the boring details and just tell you the good ones. It turns out, the man was a serial killer and rapist, and had already killed multiple victims. The man pouring boiling liquid all over his body was some sort of sadistic, satanic ritual of his. Or so, that's what he had explained to the police. A creepy, sadistic man who ran the gas station. Let's not meet again. The night sky was clear and starry, and the air was crispy and cool. The clock said it was midnight, but I could not fall asleep. My husband had drifted off to sleep an hour ago, at least, but I could not keep my eyes closed for the life of me. I turned to my side, away from him facing the window when I jumped out of bed, went to the window to get a closer look. I was half trying to understand how it could have happened that I had fell asleep without noticing, half trying to understand whatever was happening outside of our cabin. Now, some backstory. David and I have been married for 5 years. We met in college, dated for 3, and got married when we were both 25. We have no children yet, though we've been trying for about 2 years now. He works a pretty normal corporate job, and I'm a veterinarian. It's been quite a while since we've gone on a vacation of any kind, so I thought a quick weekend getaway would do us both a favor. The stress of work and the pandemic, on top of the stress from trying to get pregnant and failing for so long, has really begun to affect both of our mental health. We live in a small house in the suburbs. He commutes to work every day. I go to my clinic out of town, helping locals with their pets and livestock. One of the things that David and I have in common is our love for the outdoors and nature. I had arranged this trip and booked us a little cabin in the mountains. The place is heavenly. The view from this little place is outstanding, and the forest behind it makes the perfect spot. We plan to explore the forest for a while, go hiking around for a bit, maybe even have a picnic out and just enjoy the fresh air and each other's company. We'd arrived at this heaven on earth on a Friday evening. I parked my truck in front of the cabin, settling in for the weekend. It was so good. The cabin was almost something out of a fairy tale. We made dinner, drank some wine, and went to bed with a plan for tomorrow's morning walk in the wood. Everything was perfect. I cannot remember the last time I slept so well. The altitude and the fresh air really do wonders for a tired body and mind. David made us amazing coffee out of a French press. We ate our breakfast out on the little porch in front of the cabin. We packed some turkey sandwiches and drinks for the picnic in the woods. We got ready and headed out. We walked around the cabin, disappearing into the woods. It was probably around 10 a.m. by that point. The weather was amazing. It was late July, so a light jacket would suffice in the daytime. The forest was breathtaking. The tall trees, the thick greenery, and the treetops. Even the canopy was so overgrown, and the moss and occasional mushrooms, it all just felt magical. We walked further into the woods, stopping from time to time to check out the ground or appreciate the view. David seemed more mesmerized by the forest, and watching him be so happy made me feel even better. We were like little kids. We lost track of time for the very first time in so long. Nothing was waiting for us to finish, or an errand to run, or an email to send. I don't know how long we were walking by this point, but we came across a clearing. It was perfectly lit, and to our left side of the clearing was a little bench and a table. Clearly a picnic spot, probably made by the owners of our cabin. There were no houses or cabins near us, as far as I could tell. We made our way over to the bench, sat down and ate our own lunch in silence. At first, I didn't feel like talking as I was enjoying the background noise too much. The peace that comes from untouched nature is unmatched. As I finished my sandwich, I realized the forest was a bit quieter than what we were used to as we sat down. It was enough to make me curious. What made me realize I was uneasy was when the woods became silent. Now, we both know enough about nature to figure out that deaf silence is not a normal circumstance. In fact, if you talk to any hunter, it means there's a predator in the area. We perked our ears and tried to see if there was maybe a large animal coming our way. A deer, perhaps a mama bear. But we hadn't been able to see anything in those 5 minutes we sat there. We decided it was probably best if we got out of there, quickly, which is what we did, trying to make as little noise as possible. We returned to the cabin, much faster than I anticipated, getting inside. The rest of our day was spent indoors. It was still a nice day. We lounged in the cabin, read books and drank tea. We could not figure out what happened in the woods. We took our minds off of it and gradually went back to enjoying our alone time. I made dinner, and later that night, at around 10 p.m., we headed back to bed. I told you all of this because I guess from the events of that day, we came back. David fell asleep, and I felt compelled, for me personally, to walk to the window and take a look at the forest. The moon was full, and there was no lights on in the cabin, so the moonlight was the only light that I had, but it perfectly illuminated the woods, as well as the strange horned humanoid biped which was now standing by a large tree. I don't think it saw me, but I had a good view of it. It was standing out there in the clear, staring at the cabin with these giant red eyes. I was horrified by what I was seeing, and I'd felt this ominous presence in the pit of my stomach before I even looked out to see what it was. After seeing it, I noticed it wasn't coming closer, just standing there, observing our cabin as if trying to tell us to stay away from its territory. As it slowly began to dissipate, I walked back towards my bed and just quietly praying that this thing or demon would just leave us alone and not bother us. I told David when he woke up. We decided to leave the cabin earlier than we had hoped to. It creeped me out, for sure. But David, he was not willing to risk or take any chances. In my family, only my father is a working professional. His job profile demands him to transfer to different places quite a lot of time. A year ago, when he came back from San Francisco, we temporarily shifted to a larger apartment. Considering the area a flat, the price was less comparative to other apartments that we had checked. For about 1 week, everything was fine. But one day, my dad was late. He called us to tell us that he'll be working all night at the office. My mom got a call from my grandmother that my grandfather was deathly sick. She was to leave to her folks. Now, it was only me and my sister in the apartment. I was sitting in hall and my sister was in the bedroom. Between hall and the 2 bedrooms is a kitchen. My sister called out my name, demanding she wants tea. I ignored her. Then again, she said the same thing. This time, I shouted, denying her request. Then, my sister came running to the hall, asking why I shouted in the middle of the night. And therefore, I said that she demanded tea. If she wants it, she's not going to be an entitled prick. She could help herself out. Sis said that she had never asked me for tea. However, what I heard was definitely her voice. The area from hall to kitchen always felt cold to me, and after this incident, I was curious and a little startled. There came a time when I was sleeping in my room with my sister's bed above me. I had heard someone being in the kitchen as I had heard the fridge opening. I thought that was my father. I got up to proceed there. When I went there, the lights were off and nobody was up there. I go to my parents' room and knock the door. My mother opened the door and asked if her dad was in the kitchen, so she told me he did not come home. The next day, my sister was burning hot with a fever. We ended up taking her to the hospital. Doctors ran a lot of tests to figure out what was the matter, but as a result, there were no significant reason for her fever or sickness. She was actually hospitalized for over a week, and her fever was in control. Not only controlled, but she was completely healed. We went to our grandparents after her discharge. My father was all alone in the house. When after a day, he called my mother and asked her to come back. She was confused, but she said he sounded scared, so we went back home. That night, he told my mom that while he was sitting in the hall, he heard strange noises. When he walked up to check, nobody was there, but the water was spilt on the floor. Hearing this, I recalled the time when I heard my sister's voice calling for me, and then my sister got sick. I do not believe in such scary incidents, but the odds were against me. When my mother asked around and talked to our neighbors, she came to know that the couple who lived there before us, the wife was daily beaten up by her husband, eventually committing suicide. I do not know if this is even related to stuff happening to our family or potentially a poltergeist, but I somehow can't help but connect the dots. We have now moved to a new house. All the strange things have stopped, and the eeriness and the feeling of being not alone is gone. For one summer vacation, we went to my father's relatives in Thailand. I only have my grandmother from my father's side, and she lives in a village where her house is bigger than the rest in the area. When we were playing hide and seek, I was running to room upstairs to hide from my younger brother, as all these years, I've seen the room closed. But when my grandmother saw me running upstairs, she grabbed my hand and shouted at me and my brother. It taught us to not go in the room. At night, when we were sleeping, my grandmother called for my father. We woke up and ran to her room. She was lying on the floor holding out her hand for help. My father helped her and put her on the bed. We asked her how she ended up on the floor. She said she went to go drink some water, but she was standing there as she was pushed from behind. Nobody was in the room except for her. My father stayed here with her for the night. In the morning, my grandmother was lying on the bed and staring at the fan on the ceiling. When she was asked to get up and sit, she could not do it. Grandma was shaking her head from side to side, expressing the thing that she is unable to move, and her constant stare at the ceiling seemed like she was looking at somebody. Her condition did not look good, as if she had lost weight overnight. Next day, she could not move her right leg, like a paralyzed person. Dad was scared, so he called a local doctor. Doctor checked her temperature and blood pressure. It was skyrocketing. He asked Dad to immediately move Grandma to hospital. When she was hospitalized, her vitals became normal, and her health was fine compared to before. We brought her back home from the hospital. Grandmother was fine for a day or two, when one night, we heard her scream. We went running to her room, and she was on the bed, screaming, pointing at the window. We held her tightly, so she could calm down, but she constantly kept pointing at the window. I looked outside. There was nothing. Her eyes were red, and it was horrifying to see her behaving this way. It was hard to control her, as she kept telling somebody to go away, as if she could see someone. After 1 hour, she calmed down and went to sleep. We knew something was wrong, especially when we brought it back to the US with us. These episodes stopped when she moved in. Unfortunately, after 1 week, she left this world. Dad put that house on sale and never went back. This happened just last August. I was not in the best place mentally at the time. A lot of things were happening to me, and all of a sudden, I didn't know how to properly handle it. See, I'm a violin player. Not the best, but I certainly do strive for greatness. I know one day, I would love to be known. Although lately, I've been having a hard time getting some pieces right even if I have played them 1,000 times before. Failure is my biggest fear, and when I'm failing at something, I tend to lose myself and just get out of control with my thoughts and everything. My parents suggested to me that I go to our lake house for a week or two, just to try and get my thoughts straight and relax a little from everything. At that time, it seemed like a great idea, actually. Exactly what I needed. I was just surprised I hadn't thought of it sooner. Whenever we go to the lake house, I come back like a new and improved person. It's just something about that house that has a positive effect on me. It always has, but it doesn't just have a positive effect on me. In fact, anybody who goes there will more than likely have a great time and get something positive out of it. It's just something in the air there. I remember a few years ago, my parents were going through a really rough patch in their marriage. So we went there and everything was back to normal again. As I mentioned, it's been really hard for me to get a couple of these tunes right. I cannot move on from it. I played them perfectly before. I don't see what the problem is. My fingers have been not wanting to cooperate for days. I feel like I'm driving myself crazy if I continue on like this. That's the way I'm going. I need a break for myself, to focus on me, to realize I'm more than my playing, and to connect with myself again. I was thinking of not bringing any electronics, but I realized it would literally be crazy not to bring my phone at least, just in case I literally break a leg or something. My parents let me take their car. They were probably not going anywhere far anytime soon, and if they wanted to, they could have always had me take the bus. The lake house is about 2 or 3 hour drive from where I live. It was probably the most relaxing drive I ever had taken. Maybe that's because I don't go there more often. When I got there, I felt at peace, and as soon as I saw the house and saw how secluded it was, it's probably the only house in a 2-mile radius from each side. But the isolation is what my parents were going for when they bought it. The privacy gives me a chance to relax and completely unwind. First, I opened all the windows and cleaned up, but I noticed something wasn't the same inside the house. I just couldn't put my finger on it. I thought maybe my parents painted or something, but I didn't know. It took me a few hours to set everything up, settling down, and I felt so happy when I finished. All afternoon, I had been sitting on the patio reading when the sun began to go down. I felt like going for a run. While running, I had the weirdest feeling in my gut, like somebody was watching me, or somebody was there with me, even though there wasn't anybody near me for miles, as much as I knew. The roads felt different. I could not recognize any of the paths that I usually jogged at. Something was different, completely different. I didn't want to stress about it, though. Plus, maybe it wasn't even about the place. Maybe I've changed. After all, last time I was here was a year ago. A lot of things have changed since then, so that could be the reason everything feels so different. It was getting pretty dark, so I went back to the house. I turned the lights on and made myself a cup of tea to make me warm. The nights got pretty chilly, no matter how hard I tried. I just could not get this feeling of unknown out of me. Like I've been here for 1,000 times, but this time, it feels as if I'd never stepped foot in the house. I brushed the feeling off again, even though I probably should not have. I was reading again when, all of a sudden, the front door opened. It was as if somebody had pushed it, but there was nobody inside. There were no wind. I mean, it was blowing a little bit, but not that strong of a wind to kick the door open. To say I was frightened would be the understatement of the year. At that moment, I realized I'm not alone in this house. Anybody could be here. Anybody. Somebody could have followed me in or something that I could not get help from anywhere. I called my mother immediately, telling her that something is wrong and asked her what I should do. My brain was paralyzed from fear. She told me that if I'm scared, I should probably just come home, and I agreed. But when I began to hang up, she asked me the most heart-wrenching question. She asked me why I was playing a specific violin piece that I was playing it the last few years. I froze at that moment and told her nothing is playing in the background and that I'm not playing the violin. Literal silence is around. And then she asked me if I had my violin near me, and I was just messing with her. I ran out of the house and began driving home without looking back. I was scared. I turned the radio on and tried to get the tension out of the air, but the only thing I could hear was that violin piece playing over the radio. I turned it off, but it would not stop playing. I was losing my mind. I sped up so that I would get back to my house quickly, but I couldn't stand it and broke the radio. I will probably never think of going to that lake house or playing that song ever again. Being a nurse means I have to travel around at odd times between hospitals and nursing training programs, which is honestly fine by me. I don't mean it to be a bad way, but if you compare it to spending a couple of hours in the ER versus driving alone with your favorite crappy music on, then I think you could see where I'm coming from. Besides that, I get to visit places, meet new people, so it's kind of my own break. Anyway, just a few days ago, it was roughly 2 a.m. on a Monday. I was driving back up to Upper Greenland Lake from the Union Valley using Clinton Road. It was dark and quiet, which isn't something peculiar for me, having traveled alone on highways for a while now. But the thing that really struck me was the owls hooting. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't quiet either. There was a certain unnatural cadence to the rhythm. It kind of disturbed me. Anyway, I turned up my music a little more and continued driving. A few miles onto the highway, my GPS started beeping and showing a different route. It showed me that I should take a turn 1.5 miles ahead onto a safe off-road. This would help me get to the Upper Greenland Lake quicker. So, 1.5 miles after, I took a turn putting all of my faith into the GPS, as I had before all the times, and began driving on a dirt road. A couple of minutes after that I'd gotten on the road, my screen showed a GPS lost, which was kind of weird. It also started worrying me because I was on a route that I'd never heard of before, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. I kept going through and checking if the GPS was back. Around 3 a.m, I see a tall figure standing on the side of the road ahead. I couldn't see it properly, but I could tell it was a woman, judging by the figure and shape, and the long hair covering the face. She was wearing a long black gown that ended just below her knees. I know what you're thinking. It should be pretty creepy for somebody who hasn't seen that kind of dress in conditions that people come into in the ER. It's natural for people to be scared of. I know. I know that you're not supposed to stop in the middle of the night, especially after midnight, on a highway you're speeding on. I didn't think about the dangers at the time. But when I saw that woman, my nurse instincts kicked in, and I slowed down while trying to look for any hints of injury on her, wondering what she could possibly be doing out here. After all, human trafficking and all that is very real. I slowed down to approach her. I called out to her, but she didn't move. She had her hands folded as if she was holding something, but I couldn't see it because of her hair. Anyway, my car was at 15 miles an hour, and I noticed her hand extended. There was something wrapped in a white blanket, covered in red. I stopped the car near her, kept staring as she turned over the blanket in her hand, and there was a baby in it. What I imagine would be a deceased baby. Judging from the discoloration and the smudges of blood, it was at least dead for over 4 days. Note that my car windows were up. I reached for my seatbelt, about to unbuckle, when I noticed her moving face. It didn't move the hair back, but I could see 2 dark yellow eyes staring into mine. I felt chills in my body. I left my seatbelt buckled, stepping on the gas. God, did I speed. I looked back from the rearview mirrors as I started to drive away, which is when I realized her feet were backwards. Like literally, her toes were at the opposite side. I lost all control and panicked, speeding even more as I raced ahead on the road, trying to get GPS signals and find a sign of something that would tell me where I was heading onto, trying to get back to Clinton Road or on my way to Greenland Lake. I didn't care about where the road was leading me. I kept going for hours until I saw an intersection in the distance, connecting the dirt road with the highway, and I took it. Ironically, as soon as I did, the GPS came back up, as if the signal through there was terrible. This was easily the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. You would think it's strange if I told you that my favorite pastime was climbing up in the mountains, but it's true. One of the best perks of living in Maggie Valley was I could just go out of the house, decide to walk up the mountains and the forest in any time I wanted to. My parents are pretty chill, so there were days I came back home pretty late. There was never anything wrong. At that point, I had the whole mountain range and forest on the tips of my fingers, due to how frequently I visited them and how much time I spent there. I haven't told this to my parents. I'm sure they would not let me go there again, but I told it to my friend Sam, who now always heads up there with me since the event. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was bored of playing Fortnite. The weather outside was pretty nice, so I thought I'd go up in the mountains. I packed my usual supplies and headed out. After going in, I began walking around, just kicking a stone or two in my path. There's a really neat spot I had found in the forest, with a huge fallen log on the ground and a view down the mountain. I walked in that spot's direction, but I couldn't find it. It weirded me out. I'd gone there at least a dozen times before, and now there was no way I had gone the wrong way. I began walking more, and I don't know how, but it just became a part of the forest that I'd never seen. Here, the trees were barely alive. They were thin and creepy. No sound at all of any kind. I didn't see any familiar plant or spot. Nothing that I had immediately recognized. It made me curious, so I kept going. It wasn't until I heard a scream, an ear-piercing one, that I had stopped. I could feel the ground shaking under my feet, but the scream kept going. It sounded like it was getting closer, which really freaked me out. So I began tracing my steps back to where I had come from, and kept running until I saw the path that I used to go down the mountains. It wasn't until I was going down that it finally stopped. I didn't look up or stop until I was at the bottom, and then ran back home. I have no idea what that was, and where I was. It wasn't the forest I went into every day. I know because the next day, I went in again with a friend, and found my spot easily, always following the same path I always did. Did I somehow enter in and walk into the Twilight Zone, or another dimension?